When Julian met Aveline at a city-sponsored mural unveiling, their chemistry was effortless. He was a former architect-turned-sculptor, known for shaping abandoned spaces into art. She was a linguist specializing in endangered dialects, who carried a quiet gravity in every word she spoke. Their lives had been shaped by reinvention, and neither had imagined their names, those silent markers of identity, would become the canvas for their boldest transformation yet. Julian had grown up in the shadow of a legacy he neither earned nor admired. His father, Leonard Rothschild, was a hedge fund magnate known as much for his arrogance as his philanthropy. Julian's mother, Elise, had left when he was 12, leaving behind a trail of perfume and handwritten recipes, but no forwarding address. He found solace in structure, buildings, bridges, and eventually sculpture. Architecture, to him, was the negotiation between permanence and vulnerability. Over time, his sculptures became an embodiment of that tension. Fragments of abandoned, places transformed into fluid, kinetic forms. Aveline, born Aveline Celeste de Vere, had a more elusive origin. Her mother was a French-born opera singer who gave up the stage for silence after a traumatic vocal injury. Her father, an academic obsessed with purity and discipline, raised Aveline with rules but no room to explore. Her name, de Vere, sounded aristocratic, but the velvet of it had often felt like a gag. She studied languages to understand the silences between words. It was, in some ways, a rebellion against a childhood that demanded control over every syllable. They met at the mural unveiling, but their connection deepened during a series of artist residencies hosted by the city. Shared creative spaces became shared thoughts, which became shared nights and mornings. Their love bloomed between train rides and terrace breakfasts, through the noise of overlapping dreams. It wasn't the kind of romance that needed fixing. It was full-bodied and reverent, a mixture of grounded admiration and wild ambition. They moved in together within 8 months, not because they were rushing, but because it felt inefficient to love each other from separate corners of the city. Julian had always carried the surname Rothschild, a remnant of his estranged father's legacy, a name heavy with unearned prestige and unwanted shadows. Aveline's surname, de Vere, was a more complex burden, beautiful and melodic, but also the echo of a lineage that never accepted who she truly was. Together, they had conversations under soft lamplight and in the middle of laundromats about identity, freedom, and the quiet power of choosing. They shared a loft in a converted firehouse in the heart of the Arts District. The walls were exposed brick, the ceilings raw with memory. Julian filled it with kinetic metal sculptures that moved with drafts and time. Aveline strung audio wires between rooms like nerve endings, capturing whispers in languages nearing extinction. Their home became a laboratory of becoming. Their social circle became just as eclectic as their living space. There was Rafi, a poet who refused to publish but left stanzas on park benches. Leora, a documentary filmmaker chronicling forgotten. Subcultures became a close friend to Aveline, and Matteo, an urban farmer with a background in sound engineering, collaborated often with Julian. These friends witnessed the unfolding intimacy between the couple, and often found themselves pulled into late-night debates about the boundaries of self and the weight of inherited expectations. One afternoon, while cataloging dialectal variations of home for a new project, Aveline posed a question neither had ever heard asked aloud. What if we created our own name? Julian blinked. Like, invent it? Yes, she said, her eyes lighting up. Not a blend of ours, not from a family tree. Something brand new, a name that sounds like us. It began as a curiosity, then evolved into weeks of linguistic exploration and emotional excavation. They scribbled ideas on napkins, tested sounds out loud, even analyzed the phonetics to see what felt musical and grounded at once. They consulted with linguists, poets, and etymologists. Aveline made spreadsheets. Julian sketched how different names might look engraved in stone. They wanted something timeless, unburdened, and quietly defiant. They settled on Verwyn, a soft, two-syllable name that felt both ancient and freshly born. It had no history, which meant they could build one. They chose it not to erase their pasts, but to untether from expectations that no longer served them. Changing their names wasn't a rebellion. It was a reclamation. The process, legal, social, emotional, was less glamorous than expected. Friends were confused. Some family members were hurt. A few dismissed it as a performative act, but most came to understand that it wasn't about distancing themselves from love, but about deepening the connection to each other. Julian's younger sister, May, initially refused to call him anything other than Rothschild. "You can't just unname yourself," she said during a strained brunch. "It's who we are." "No," Julian replied gently. "It's who we were told to be." Aveline's father sent her a cold email. "You've always wanted to be someone else. I suppose this is fitting." Her mother, in contrast, mailed her an old necklace with a note that read, "Whatever name you carry, remember you were always singing your own song." They filed the paperwork on a rainy Thursday, surrounded by the sterile hum of the civil court office. When the clerk called them by their new name, Julian and Aveline Verwyn, the room didn't erupt into applause, but something deep inside them clicked into place. They began to notice subtle shifts. Julian found himself more willing to experiment, blending organic materials into his sculptures, twigs, linen, even sound. Aveline began composing immersive audio essays in fictional languages, inviting listeners into linguistic dreamscapes. Their work grew stranger, more intimate. Verwyn became not just a name, but a philosophy, to create from the inside out. They hosted monthly salons in their loft, inviting fellow artists, linguists, and urban philosophers. Conversations drifted from the etymology of belonging to the politics of gentrification. A community gathered, not around who they had been, but who they were becoming. One guest, a poet named Raffi, called Verwyn a cartography of self. Another guest, an elderly choreographer, wept while tracing the name in cursive, saying it reminded her of a place she'd never been but always believed existed. As the years passed, Julian and Aveline found themselves mentoring younger artists. They established a fellowship under the Verwyn name, dedicated to creatives pursuing identity through unconventional mediums. The first recipient, a Syrian-born calligrapher exploring visual representations of grief, cited their story as the reason she applied. Julian Verwyn and Aveline Verwyn looked unfamiliar in signatures at first, but over time the name settled on them like a favorite sweater. It didn't make their relationship perfect. No name could do that. but it served as a reminder of who they chose to be, together. Years later, at the opening of their joint exhibition, Julian's sculptures beside Aveline's audio installations, in a reimagined post office turned cultural space, a journalist asked about the name. Aveline answered with her usual clarity. Verwyn isn't just who we are. It's what we became when we stopped inheriting and started creating. The article ran the next day with the headline, Inventing Verwyn, the Art of Becoming. When the exhibit closed, they donated one of their collaborative pieces, a suspended sphere of bronze whispering in extinct dialects, to a public library. Its title, The Name We Chose. By then, some of their friends had taken up the practice of name-shaping. A non-binary musician became Selu. A couple from their salon circle, once married under two surnames, now shared one, Thornaby. It was not a trend, it was a quiet revolution. Julian and Aveline often returned to that moment, the spark of a question under a desk lamp. Aveline once said, "Our name gave us a door we didn't know we needed." Julian, always sculpting metaphor into metal, added, "and the courage to walk through it." Even after all the exhibitions, conversations, and years, Verwyn remained unfinished, and that, perhaps, was the point. Like love, like language, like art. It was never about the name itself. It was about giving themselves permission to start again,